Welcome to this TubeDual Original Explainer. Today we're going to take over 600 years of golf history and condense it right down, tracking its absolutely incredible journey from a banned medieval pastime all the way to the multi-billion-dollar global industry it is today. I am thrilled to dive into this with you and explore how hitting a pebble with a stick somehow turned into a worldwide phenomenon.
Okay, let's kick things off with a pretty wild question. Did golf actually start in Scotland? I mean, we universally associate the game with those rolling green Scottish hills, right? But there's actually historical evidence of a 13th century Dutch game that was played entirely on ice. It really raises a fascinating question about where the true roots of this game actually lie.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be moving through 5 distinct eras: origins on ice and turf, writing the rules of golf, the equipment revolution, building the professional game, and finally, the live golf disruption.
Starting off with our first era, origins on ice and turf, let's dig into these incredibly murky, contested European roots.
Picture this. It's the 15th century in the Netherlands. People are playing a game called kolf, spelled with a C. They're using wooden sticks to smack a leather ball, but they're doing it across frozen rivers. And here's the kicker. The goal wasn't to put the ball into a hole, but actually to strike a pole stuck in the ice using the fewest possible strokes. It's widely believed that Dutch seamen and merchants brought this game over to Scotland while waiting for their ships to be refitted.
Now contrast that freezing Dutch river with the rugged, windy coast of Scotland. We're talking about Linksland, where pioneer grasses were constantly being stunted by harsh winds, salt air, and grazing animals. Scottish shepherds basically used this natural, ready-made terrain during their downtime, using their walking staffs to hit stones into rabbit holes. And that specific tweak, putting a ball into an object hole, well, that was the crucial spark that birthed the target hole game we recognize as modern golf.
And apparently, early Scottish golf was incredibly addictive. In fact, it was so popular and such a massive distraction that the Scottish Parliament and King James II legally banned it in 1457. They literally decreed that golf be entirely shut down because they needed young men to get back to their military archery practice to fend off English invasions. The bans were actually reaffirmed multiple times until 1502. That's when King James IV, who had quietly become a golfer himself and bought his own clubs, finally repealed the ban, officially giving the game the royal stamp of approval.
That brings us to our second era, writing the rules of golf. This is where we move from a scattered coastal hobby to strict standardization.
So what we have are the 13 Articles. These were drafted way back in 1744 by the gentlemen golfers of Leith in Scotland, and they essentially formed the very first codified rules of the sport. If you read through the original text, you'll spot early rules like having to tee your ball within a club's length of the hole and strict instructions that a ball absolutely must be played where it lies. This was the exact moment golf transformed from just a casual way to pass the time into a structured, competitive sport.
And this drive for standardization gave us the magic number every golfer knows: 18. But why 18 holes? Well, the legendary Old Course at St. Andrews originally had 12 holes, 10 of which were played twice, making it a 22-hole round. But in 1764, the Royal and Ancient Golf Club basically decided that the first 4 holes were just too short, so they combined them into 2 holes, which naturally bumped the total round down to 18. And just like that, a simple course management decision established the global standard we're still using today.
Okay, time for a quick trivia break. Have you ever wondered why golfers randomly yell 4? Well, about 200 years ago, golf balls were insanely expensive. To avoid losing them, players hired assistants called 4 caddies to stand way ahead on the course and track exactly where errant shots landed. When players hit a wild shot, they'd shout out to warn them. Over time, the assistant just became known as a caddy, and that warning shout was just shortened to 4.
Which perfectly tees up, pun intended, our third era, the equipment revolution, where technology completely changed how the game was played.
Tracking these rapid technological leaps is wild. We start in the 15th century with primitive solid wooden balls. I mean, think about the hand vibrations on those. Then we move to the leather feathery in the 17th century. By 1848, someone invented the gutta percha ball, made from dried tree sap, which suddenly made the game way more affordable. In 1898, the explosive Haskell rubber core ball changed absolutely everything again. And finally, by the 1920s, we see the major transition from flexible hickory wood shafts to consistent, highly durable steel. To really grasp this shift, let's compare 2 massive milestones.
The feathery required a craftsman to literally stuff a top hat's worth of wet, boiled goose feathers into a tiny leather pouch. As it dried, the feathers expanded into a rock-hard sphere. It was incredibly labor-intensive, often costing more than an actual club, and it maxed out at about 175 yards. Contrast that with a Haskell ball. Featuring a rubber core wound tight with rubber thread and a dimpled cover, it was explosive. It dramatically extended player distance up to 250 yards, which literally forced golf courses to physically lengthen their holes just to keep up.
So, with the rules locked in and the gear upgraded, we enter our fourth chapter, building the professional game.
The professional game really began to institutionalize back in 1860 with the very first Open Championship over in Scotland. Fast forward to 1916, and department store magnate Rodman Wanamaker actually hosted a luncheon in New York City with top players to elevate the whole vocation of the golf professional. That specific meeting birthed the PGA of America, and their premier annual championship still awards the magnificent Wanamaker Trophy to this day.
But this professional boom absolutely wasn't just for the men. Riding the massive post-World War II economic wave, the LPGA was founded in 1950 by 13 incredible trailblazers. Just think about these early accomplishments. You had Betty Jamieson, who shattered scoring ceilings by becoming the first woman ever to score under 300 in a 72-hole tournament at the 1947 U.S. Open, and Sally Sessions, an absolute powerhouse athlete who once won a major tennis tournament and a golf tournament on the exact same day. Together, these women built what is now the longest-running professional women's sports organization in the world.
And finally, we arrive at our fifth and most recent era, the LIV Golf disruption. This is without a doubt the most significant structural transformation the modern professional game has ever faced.
The 2021 structural innovations of the Saudi-backed LIV Golf League completely flipped the traditional PGA Tour script. LIV fundamentally challenged the established model in a few huge ways. First, LIV events are just 54 holes instead of the traditional 72. There are absolutely no field cuts. They also use what's called shotgun starts, where every single player begins at the exact same time on different holes just to condense the whole TV broadcast window. Plus, they combine traditional individual competition with a simultaneous team format. It is just a massive, massive departure from traditional golf decorum.
And we have to objectively look at the schism this created. LIV Golf introduced staggering $25 million tournament purses and massive guaranteed contracts. This drew huge defections from absolute superstars like Phil Mickelson and Brooks Koepka. On the flip side, PGA Tour loyalists like Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy firmly dug in to defend the historic tour. The new league also sparked intense ethical debates, with critics levying heavy allegations of sports washing. Then, out of nowhere in June 2023, a shock framework merger agreement was announced, aiming to combine the commercial operations of both tours and basically throwing the entire future of the sport into totally uncharted territory.
So to wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. Golf is a sport that literally survived 15th century royal bans. It survived the incredibly tedious transition from hand-stuffed feather balls to modern titanium drivers. It has grown from freezing icy rivers in Europe to a massive multi-billion-dollar global industry. As this modern tension between historic tradition and massive commercial innovation plays out, how will golf's remarkable 600-year resilience shape the future of the game? It's definitely a fascinating question to chew on the next time you step onto the tee box. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the history of golf, and keep learning.